Again, thanks everyone for joining us. This is, I think, our second last webinar for the year. We've got some really good feedback with the webinars, so we've really enjoyed, I suppose, a different medium and sort of trying to get some information out to clients. So we will send a survey out at the end of the webinar, but if you've got any ideas, any sort of suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about, then please let us know. So we just want to make sure we're delivering information that's relevant to what your needs are. So speaking of which, today we've got Melanie Findlay from Rees R Sydney Jones. Melanie's a partner there, and she's going to be going through vegetation mapping and I suppose helping clear up some of the confusion around that. Everyone should be on mute. We like to keep these webinars fairly informal, so if it's all right with you, Melanie, if people can just unmute themselves and pop in with a question if they have any questions, and are you happy? You'll be happy to answer the questions there. Mm-hmm. If not, we've got the chat box running, so down the bottom of your screen you'll be able to write a question in, and we can just ask Melanie as we go along if you don't want to ask it yourself. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Melanie. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for the invitation, guys. I've got a bit of a special interest in trees and environmental law, so at the firm, as well as doing a bit of due diligence when someone's buying a property and looking at mapping. I also do like carbon agreements and vegetation offset agreements between clients and proponents. But today we also take care of people when they get into trouble for doing the wrong thing. Maybe the catch on the plane that was supposed to be dumping some pellets got left open a bit long, or we've got the odd problem that happens like that. So I take care of that kind of thing. But today is just supposed to be a bit of a way to help you navigate looking at your own property, and how to touch on the websites and things that we use here to do a bit of due diligence if you're looking at purchasing a property. So it's a bit of a vegetation 101. So I sent around, or in the invitation, you would have seen the couple of topics that I was going to talk about. So how to print your reports at any time, how generally veg laws work, which parts of the reports that you should understand, red flags that we look for in the office if we're, if we're doing a purchase and we're doing some due diligence inquiries for a client. There's a lot of confusion about trigger areas, so I thought I would talk about that a little bit. And then just for some fun, sometimes when I'm talking to the other solicitors here, we will go and just have a look at random properties around Queensland and pull their mapping, because sometimes, like, I pulled Stradbroke Island, for example, just to show you how interesting and complicated the mapping can be. So I've just done some interesting examples for you guys there. So I'm just going to share my screen with the PowerPoints that I've prepared. Does that work?
Good.
Yeah, good. Okay, so how do I go forward though? Arrow button?
Try that.
There we go. So yeah, so this is just more a practical thing, and I'll show you the websites that you can all touch yourselves and play with yourselves. So obviously vegetation, when you're purchasing a property, it can really affect what the purchase price might be that you might pay, depending on what kind of maps reveal in your due diligence process. So so a bit of Vegetation 101. So a lot of clients talk about the VMA, or the Vegetation Management Act, and I like to think of that act as being the state act that covers clearing lots of trees and lots of vegetation. There are plenty of other acts also that apply. So clients sort of tend to focus just on that one piece of legislation, but there's heaps that actually overlays vegetation. The other act that is pretty important is the Nature Conservation Act, or the NCA. So that's, rather than being about lots of trees, it's just about the special vulnerable trees. So cycads, full mapping for special frangipanis, just really rare plants. And then obviously the Water Act covers veg in water corridors. We've got the Fisheries Act. Surprisingly, local government legislation can trump the state act, and I'll explain that to you as well. So it can be really complicated. A client will come to me and say, oh, I've got a white area on my mapping is Cat X. Can I clear for this? And the answer is not always clear. They often even have to go look at the local laws with their local council to work out whether or not they can clear. There's the federal legislation, which is the EPBC. So that's, you know, koalas, federally significant plants or animals. So brigalow, yes, it's a state protected plant, but if it's in a big community, it's something that might trigger federal involvement. So basically any clearing that you intend to do, it can bring in a whole raft of legislation, not just the one act that people tend to focus on. So basically under the VMA, which is the common legislation that everyone looks at, you can clear, but you need to do it under certain guidelines. So there are exemptions, there are codes, there are area development plans that can be, area management plans that can be done by certain communities, and there's development approvals through local councils. The most common ones that our ag clients deal with are the exemptions. So that's like, you know, I've got a Cat B area, I'd like to do some thinning, or I would like to do some fence lines, or I'd like to do some, you know, something around some infrastructure to make sure that it's nice and clear around my infrastructure. There are exemptions for that kind of work, but there are rules and codes about what you can and can't do in certain circumstances. So the first thing that you need to do is you can pull your veg map for your property at any time, and it has a date when you pull the veg report, and any time you are going to do any kind of clearing, you should pull your mapping on that date. So I've got a link here for requesting a veg report. So basically, these reports change from time to time, not just because the government brings in new koala legislation, but the Nature Conservation Act actually updates every year and the mapping changes all the time. So as a part of any clearing that you need to do, you need to check your mapping first. And there's all these rules about record keeping in case you do get into trouble. And clicking on this map, saving the report, which has the date on the front of it, is really important in case you're going to get into trouble for doing the wrong thing. You wouldn't want to rely on a report that's a year old and then suddenly it's changed and you cleared in the wrong area. So that's the link to the report. These reports never used to show if someone had a PMAV, but they've been updated recently. So now there's a nice PMAV noting. So a PMAV is Veg 101, so it's a property map of accessible vegetation. So basically, the government went over with a satellite years ago and guessed its best guess 1:100,000 scale of what the veg on your property is, and it got it wrong sometimes. So you can go to the government and ask for your veg mapping to be changed. We don't normally do that. It's normally done by some environmental consultants, or you can do it yourself. And you can fix up your mapping and lock in your PMAV through that process. But yeah, so this is a really important link. And on the next slide, I'll just go through. So I've just pulled, showed you what the actual report looks like. So there's 3 choices when you go to that link, and you need to pull the full report, is my view, not just the other reports. People were getting caught years ago just pulling the PMAV, and they were missing those trigger map areas and they weren't reading their maps in full. So you click the top option and then you just put your lot on plan in. Your email box will pop up. You'll just insert your email and it will email it to you within about 5 minutes. And that's your current report. So this is what the front page of the report looks like, and it's got the important date here for the date that you pulled the report. It's about 26 pages long, but honestly we look about 7 pages of it. It is interesting reading for people like me if you want to read the lot, but when we're looking for a client who's buying property, we only look at about 7 pages. So I'll just go through, I was going to pull a whole report for you, but if you wanted to do that yourselves and just put your own property in, On page 9 of the report, it now says if there's a PMAV, and maybe there's been one or more than one, or there's two. I also look at page 9 because when you look at that report, it'll say, okay, there's cat X, which is the good stuff that it's exempt from clearing basically. And then it'll say there's this much cat B and this much cat A, and it'll have a hectare size. I look at page 10 as well because there might be a koala habitat, squatter pigeon, something like that. It will mention exactly what habitat might be interesting on that property, which then links to a later map in the report. Essential habitat is sometimes not only for animals, but for different types of plants, like maybe there's a wetland or something like that. And that might trigger me to go, okay, well, I need to look at the wet rivers legislation, for example. The regulated vegetation map is, I'll show you a page here. So the regulated vegetation map is normally the one that you guys want to look at, which has got the blue, the white, or the yellow. I look further than just that map and look at the supporting map. So the first page that you're on page, I think it's page 10 of the report. I've gone too far now. Go back. Yeah, so page 13 of the report is a simple map. Page 14 of the report is the map that I normally look at. So I'll just show you, for example, I had a client here who, this is the map that they sent me, and they were talking about depositing some gravel in a certain area, and it was up here somewhere. And if I had have just pulled the normal report, it just would have shown blue over the entire thing, and it just would have said it was Cat B. But when I look at the supporting map down here, these blue lines to me tell me that it's a wetland. So not only is this type of species of tree normally grown in that area, I can see that it's a wetland, and therefore there might be other legislation that might apply. So you don't just look at one map, you look at the supporting map. And in the supporting map as well, there are all these little numbers here. So it'll say 11.2.11. You can actually Google those numbers and you can actually see what type of vegetation they are. So it might say eucalypt sparse, or it'll say the actual species. So we normally read this mapping if we're being asked about development works on a property, not just the blue, white and yellow one. So on those pages I was talking about, so if you've got, this is a normal map that's just got the blue, yellow and the white. The reasons why we might note certain things in a report is just because something is blue or a funny colour, it might not be of concern. So it might not be very special. But if something has the words endangered or threatened or something like that, then we know that the development in that area is going to be very difficult. In this instance, this report was pulled by me because I object to mining as well. And the Department of Mines doesn't always talk to the Department of Environment very well. And so this client was given a notice saying that someone wanted to come on and do work on their property. And I, in my submissions to the department, pointed out the mapping to say that the mining lease shouldn't be granted because they were going to come really close to these certain watercourses and areas. And not only were they going to come close to those areas, there was endangered semi-evergreen vine thicket, and they therefore shouldn't be granted the mining lease. There was vulnerable species up in the rocky areas, and we were able to get the department to basically the miner then, he was asking for certain exemptions to come closer to a client's, like to an area of interest where the client didn't really want them. And because of the way the veg ran through the middle of the property, we were basically able to get rid of the mining lease. So there's lots of tricky ways to skin a cat, and that's what we always, even when we're looking at a mining file, we pull these veg reports to see where they can and can't go. This is the supporting map for that blue map that we were just looking at, and again there's these cross lines. So again, that's essential habitat or a wetland. So that's this legend down here is what you look at. So blue hashing is generally bad from a landowner's point of view in that you're not going to be able to touch it, but good from a mining point of view if you want to keep them off your property. The last map that we like to look at is the trigger mapping. Now, trigger mapping is under the Nature Conservation Act, so that's not about lots of trees, that's about single trees. So at some point in time, someone in this area found a special frangipani or a special cycad or something, and they picked up the sample and they sent it to Brisbane, and it's sitting in the herbarium in Brisbane. And they keep that data and they work out whether or not that plant is special or vulnerable. It might be that if they get sent 50,000 samples from all over the state, this is the map that changes annually. So it might be that if someone sends in 50,000 samples all over the state, they go, okay, well, this plant's not special and vulnerable, and the trigger map might actually disappear. Lately, the trigger maps have been getting bigger rather than disappearing, and there was that big controversy a little while ago where they actually had Suncourt Stadium got covered in the trigger map, and it caused a big uproar. So the government had hit the wrong key and they went a bit too wild in regards to the trigger map areas. So these used to look like blue dots, but now they look like great big areas. You can actually take the latitude and longitude of this area and put it into plants online, or there's a wildlife atlas, and you can actually find out what the plant is, who found it, what date it was found, and where the sample is. So it was pretty interesting. I was up in Claremont one day and we're doing some of this mapping, and a client, I think he was in sort of like, one of those landholder groups where they were very active in saying that this was, he wanted to basically get rid of the veg laws, as it was a, intrusion on the client's rights. And he said, look, this is a joke. I don't even know how they know where the plant is. No one's even been there for 100 years. Like, what plant is it? And we were able to pull the plant. And it was really funny when we actually went into the herbarium records. The plant was found in 1976, and it was the client's best man at his wedding when we looked at the name of the person that found the sample. So you can stalk really well and find this stuff out. But this trigger map, if you lock in your PMAV, it doesn't matter. This map changes every year, no matter what you do. There is a lot of myths about getting rid of trigger mapping and making it white again and paying people lots of money to do that, and you just can't do it. So. Okay. I just wanted to show you this map. It's not always stuff that we have to look at for rural clients. So this is actually a property in Brisbane. So this was, the client wanted to do some work and develop the area. When you look at the essential habitat, there's the naughty K word. So we've got koala, and we've got lots of essential habitat for koalas. So the chances of that client being able to develop down there with that significant cost are really low. So that client was, really interested in his mapping because he was looking at a later development. So the further south you go at the moment, the koala habitat maps have really changed. This client was looking at spending money on some country that needed some, it had significant rubber vine. They thought that they would buy the property and clear the rubber vine, and there was some good black basalt country, and but unfortunately it was just covered in rubber vine. They were going to look at spending quite a lot of money on the property, and their view was that they would be able to just get some chemicals and dump it out of a plane to get rid of the rubber vine. If you look at the area, so this is the area he was telling me he was going to do the clearing. So, and when I say clearing, I mean just cleaning weeds. Like, I'm not talking about clearing native habitat or anything like that, just weeds. So he circled these areas for me. And when I came over here and looked at his supporting mapping, again, those lines going that way, that hatching, that triggers me to go talk to my botanist. So I've got a good relationship with the botanist and a couple of enviros around town, because the way to treat that rubber vine looked quite expensive to me. And when he did go and speak to my botanist, he confirmed that there will have to be men walk around with backpacks, and they'll have to do selective chemicals, and they won't be able to just dump that out of a plane, basically. And this is a very big property. So if you ever pull a property map for a property that you're looking at buying and there's red flags need to go off. So a red area is either a compliance notice, so the vendor might have done some illegal clearing, or they might have some rehabilitation works to do because there might have been an incident, or the landholder has voluntarily said, okay, I'm happy to lock this country up and bring back this type of habitat, or it's an offset area. So offsets are, okay, a developer in Brisbane is going to knock down a pile of koala habitat. So they go and find someone out at, Bajul, and they say, okay, your place looks like good koala habitat. Can we pay you to maintain the area in a state that follows a plan? And that client will sign up for a 10-year period or an extended period of time to perform that management plan. And they may or may not be getting paid for that. It depends on the structure of the document that would attach to this. So if you see red when you pull your map, you know that there's something to do. That if you take on the property, you're going to have obligations. And you need to find out how much that stuff's going to cost, what your restrictions are going to be, and then the codes that might deal with the red, whether or not those managing obligations are finished or not. The codes are quite restrictive in terms of what you can do. So a red flag is stuff that's red. I found this one on Queensland Globe. I just added in the layer for vegetation offsets, and then just found anything red in Queensland just for the purpose of this talk. But if anyone's interested in offsets, I can probably show you some examples of some that we've done that have got some management obligations that run with them. And those management obligations depend on what type of plant or habitat or animal that we're trying to preserve. Okay. Now, if you've got category B or category A, or even category X, there are clearing codes for doing that thing. I remember before I talked about doing infrastructure clearing or weeds, that kind of thing. So this link here is where you go to find all those codes. So you click on that link, and if you want to do clearing for infrastructure, there's a code for that. And you just pick which type of works you want to do, and you have to look at that code and follow that code. There is, on this same website, where these links are, there's a 60-page guide for vegetation clearing. But here's some nice simple steps. So you pull your vegetation map, choose the right code for the works you're going to do. You may have to secure exchange areas depending on what you're going to knock over. And you have to always notify the government now. And then you've got to keep good records. So you might say that you're going to comply with a code, but if the code says you're only allowed to clear 10 trees per 100 acres or whatever, or you've got to leave, any trees that are above the height of your head up, the records that you'll have to keep will include the photographs that you've taken to prove what you did, the before, the after. If you're getting someone else to do it, like a contractor, the instructions that you gave to the contractor, that kind of thing. It sounds really terrible, but it's almost like a backwards onus of proof in terms of, if there's been clearing, you're going to have to prove that you did everything in the right manner. It's almost like you are guilty before you've even gone to court, basically. So you don't keep records thinking that it is a reverse onus. even though there was arguments that it shouldn't be reverse ownership, it is really. Okay, trigger areas. So these are a favourite thing of mine. So it doesn't matter if you've got a PMAV or not. Like I said, those maps can change. That's a picture of a SciCAD there because that's the most common thing we see around here. So people started noticing blue dots a few years ago on their maps when the Labor Party started talking about making lots of changes to the vegetation laws. That was the first time I think people used to pull the first reports, and they suddenly thought that Labor must have changed the laws, and suddenly they had these trigger maps. They were always there. It's just people didn't pull the full thing. Now, your PMAV does not override the Nature Conservation Act. As I said, it changes every year. They're now much larger than they used to be. They used to be just a circle and it was a 4-kilometre radius, but now they're whole rafts of land. As I said before, they're special single plants. Clients have always had an obligation to take care of plants that are under the Nature Conservation Act, so special species. It's just that no one knew where they were. The government knew where they were. They had mapping, but there was just a general overarching obligation that you guys are supposed to take care of the native species. What happened was when the LNG companies were running those big pipelines from the Surat to Gladstone, they were having to pay for botanists and really high-level enviros to go along these great big 40 or 60 metre wide easements and check for special plants. And it was really expensive. So the gas company said to the Liberal government at the time, can you make life easier on us and just tell us where these special plants are? You've got the latitude and longitude because you've got the plant down in the herbarium. Can you just tell us where these trigger areas might be? And that way, instead of us looking at the whole 640 kilometres of pipe, we only have to look at little sections. And that's actually where the blue dots came from, was it was making life easier for the gas companies. And it was the LNP that brought that one in. So everyone blames Labor for the blue dots, but it was actually the LNP. I have said something to the member for Gregory about it. Anyway. So they've always been there, they're just now we see them. So there is a myth that you can remove or lock in your trigger areas. That can't happen. If you want to do clearing in a trigger area though, there is work to be done, so you need a permit. So firstly, you have to get your botanist or your enviro to go out and do a scout. And they will look if they'll do the latitude, longitude, find out that it's the special frangipani or whatever it is. And they will go out and they'll do a scout and look for that special plant. They will charge you for that. And they are required by law when they're out there doing that scout to look for any protected species, not just that plant. So even just asking the botanist out there or your enviro out there may cause you to get more trigger areas. Okay, so that's something to have a think about. If there is no special plants there, then they issue you with a permit to do your works, and that lasts for 10 years. If they go out and they do find that there is a plant there, either the plant that was down in the herbarium or a new plant that they find, then they have to write a report, and it's an impact management report, and depending on the type of plant or how difficult it is to relocate, or it may be thousands. So these prices that I've got in here, that's the last time I got a quote. This was a place down at Emu Park, and that was just to do the 4-kilometre radius. And that's the kind of cost that you're looking at to do a scout and get a permit if it's in a trigger area. The trigger areas are now significantly larger. So if you can imagine how much the cost would be to do works in that area, it's pretty hardcore. The impact management report depends on the type of plant. So that'll be like, how big is the root circle? How should you take care of it? Like, I don't know, do you put little rocks around it to protect it? Do you have to get irrigation? I don't know. So most clients just walk away if that plant is there from doing works in that area. The funny thing is, it is only one plant. So how do they pick up on a satellite if you've knocked it over? these things don't usually get picked up by a satellite. It's normally by someone who knows the species or someone who's got environmental interest. This type of thing doesn't happen too much out in rural areas, except they do pick up large scale clearing. And if it just happens that the large scale clearing is over that trigger map area, then they will pick up that you have done clearing in that area, perhaps without a permit. So the only times I've had clients in trouble for this kind of thing have been in residential areas. I thought I'd just show you some interesting mapping. So when I was teaching one of my lawyers here about mapping, this is a property at Tamborine. So obviously koala area, very deeply coloured, very difficult to do work. And this is Stradbroke Island, so koala country. Lots and lots of different colours and lots of cross hatching. So chances of grazing cattle there are pretty low. Just to super complicate things, so a lot of clients say Cat X means I can clear. I've had someone call up and say, oh, I'd like to do some contour banking here. It's white, am I okay? So there has been a recent case where a developer in Moreton Bay, they said my land is Cat X, I can clear it, and it's gone to the Court of Appeal after the Planning and Environment Court said that the local laws and the planning legislation trumps the State Act. So even though it was white on the map, they said that the developer should follow the Moreton Bay Regional Council's local laws in regards to development. So that developer had to go get a development approval as well as being Cat X to do work in that area. So Livingston does have some regional plans that need to be looked at. So it's not as simple as saying I'm Cat X, I'm right to clear. Any questions?
Nice little drive at the trophy there, Melanie. Well done. Those that don't know, we have the Rees R Sydney Jones and the Canards have a lawn bowls competition every year for the Kenny Cup. So obviously Melanie's keen on winning it this year. That's all. Well done. It's not going to happen though.
I'm sorry. Who won last year?
You definitely winning the sledging stakes. I put you at 2 up now.
Actually, this webinar has been fantastic for me because I've learned a lot about this sort of area, especially in veg management, where I hear clients talking about it. I personally don't have anything to do it at all except for what I hear our clients talk about. So to get a better understanding of it's been brilliant. So I don't really have any questions because I've just learned the whole way through. How about yourself, Brent? What did you take out of that?
Yeah, look, I hear it all the time. I hear people with different frustrations, but around it, and probably, I suppose, lack of clarity sometimes around it. So it's very important, obviously, to read and understand the maps and get some guidance around it as well from someone like Melanie.
No, it's been brilliant. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? If you can type in the chat box, I can.
There's nothing in the chat box at the moment. We will send a copy of the slides out after this, and also a copy of the webinar. So if you want any of those links or you want to view any of those tips and tricks that Melanie has, well, they'll be coming round.
Sorry, Mark, go for it.
Yeah, I got ask a question there for Melanie. Yeah, just my name's Mark. I actually went through this process back in 2011. We had the family block just outside of Calliope, and when I was able to go into the department here, saw the different maps and overlays and stuff. Probably something that was in my favour was that I'm a botanist by active training, and I've actually worked alongside soil as conservation people, so I had a little bit of an advantage, I suppose. One of the things that we did sort of within a week and a half, I had maps and overlays and species lists and the lot, and sort of able to bombard the department here with all this information. They were saying that there was a backlog of sort of, you know, it's a couple of years, and I would have to you know, to contract out. And I said, well, look, I'll actually do it myself. Anyways, probably the main sort of contention that we had then was the difference between the regrowth and actually against remnant vegetation. At that stage, they were sort of saying that if the remnant, just the regrowth against vegetation was older than a certain sort of time, it was sort of regarded as actually remnant. Has that sort of changed much, or is that pretty much the gospel now, from the department?
So when it comes to actually changing the PMAMs and looking at that kind of thing, I normally outsource that to the environmentalist. So,
okay, yeah.
So I know I've sat in front of like, I deal with a few, so I won't plug one, but there's a lovely botanist in town here, and I've sat with him and watched him do his mapping where he's sat down and gone, I can see from that shadow angle, you can go back through lots of old satellite imagery and that kind of thing. And I've seen him do it where he proves to the department that, you know, the clearing happened on X date. Clients have got fantastic books, you know, going back through their properties where he's proven, you know, that it's actually regrowth, not, I've seen him do that, but we don't normally get involved in that.
Okay, then. Well, I had the benefit that I could actually take a lot of photographs, and you could see just visibly the difference between the heights of the trees, of course, and the composition of the trees. Like the regrowth were different species that had grown back. So it actually changed the whole, like the composition of the PMAV, and I was able to do a deal with the department. And so rather than have all of these orange and sort of red zones, it actually ended up as just white and green, and I was happy to like accept the compromise with these guys. I could have pushed for a lot more, but I figured, well, I can still actually work out with the green areas as well. So I would say to anybody, look, you really need to get someone out there who can actually see the composition of the vegetation. Look, it was 142 acres in the middle of an area that's, you know, it's surrounded by development and houses and other properties, and I had to employ someone from the university to come and tell me that there were no other koalas on the property. And like it was just in my experience, it was very, very frustrating, because I know, you know, the koalas need range, they need, you know, it's a watering points, they need all of this, and none of that was there, but it was the composition of the species of the trees that I had on the block that actually triggered that. And so, you know, it's $2,000 later and an hour, I could get a report back that said that there were no koalas. Like the closest koalas were sort of Boyne Island, Curtis Island, and up there to Coomba Top. So really there was nothing there that really said that there was any koalas there, but I had to go through the process to be able to get it actually cleared. So of that.
There is some really amazing online stuff that you can find if you want to delve deep into it. Like I've even been able to look back through the old slides online to try and prove who built a dam when, like whether it was the mining company or the landholder. And this Queensland globe, if you can work it, you can do historical imagery. It's really, like, we sit on it all the time, and it's one of the first things that we train our rural solicitors to do, because it just, the red flags that just pop up for us. But yeah, they're worth their weight in gold, those botanists and environmentalists that can have a look at those reports. And there's so much land that you know, I've seen has been the wrong colour, the shadows in the wrong spot of weed, you know. And the first thing, if someone gets in trouble for you know, they get a notice from the department saying, oh, we think that you've done some clearing, can you please explain? The first thing we say is, well, your mapping is done at 1:100,000 scale, it's probably wrong.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
That's
you.
much appreciated.
No, good. Anything else,
If
Brett?
there's
I got nothing else, I don't think.
no more questions, we might wrap it up there. So thanks for your time, Melanie. That was great.
That was interesting. I really enjoyed that. So thank you.
No worries.
I'll enjoy bidding in the Lawn Bowls tournament in a couple of weeks' time too. It'll be good as well.
I worked all day on there.
Very good night. Thank you very much.
Justin there in the middle holding the trophy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We really appreciate your time. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I'll let
Thanks,
you
everyone.
Brent, hey?
Stop recording, mate.